Well, hello there. Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, even, depending on where you are on this lovely planet that we inhabit. It is episode 256 of the Pro Synth Network show. We are live, coming mostly from the UK today. We do have a guest from a little bit further around the planet, but we'll introduce them in just a moment, although you probably know who they are. It's 3 minutes past 7 p.m. here on what is the last day of February. It's almost March. It was only Christmas yesterday, I'm sure. But anyway, welcome to the show. And thank you. I just want to say thank you to the guys for last week for taking the reins whilst I was at Synth East, living it up with the glamorous people that attend that event. So I just want to say many thanks to Robin Vincent, to Electronic Sound Magazine, and to the Norwich Arts Centre, who put on yet another fantastic event. We had John Fox giving us a Q&A with the brilliant Adam Buxton. We watched Mark Reeder's movie, B-Movie, all about Berlin from 79 to 89, which was just, I've seen it a gazillion times, but it's always good to see that film and lovely to see it reach a new audience. And then, of course, there was the Synth Expo, where there were lots of manufacturers and community stands. We were there. The guys from Take the Fear Out of the Gear were there. Ollie Freck was there, loads of manufacturers and distributors. We had Korg, Arturia, ASM. We had Yamaha, who kind of joined with us because we brought a whole bunch of Yamaha synths from the DX1 to the SK30 and the CS20. I think there was a CS5 in there as well, and CE25, and lots of great stuff. And to everybody that came to that show, came to say hi at the stand, thank you so much for coming along and saying hello. It's great to meet a lot of you in person, and to get to know you in that way. And also to everyone that wore Pro Synth Network merchandise. We saw so many T-shirts and hoodies and all sorts of things. So it was just great to sort of look around this room and see our logo somewhere in, around this hall. It was great. So thank you ever so much. And for those of you that maybe encountered us for the first time, and maybe this is your first time watching us, welcome. And I hope you enjoy the show, and stick around for tonight's show, which is a doozy, I can tell you right now. And also maybe come back in the future as we continue our passage through. It's episode 256. We've got three more after this. 4 more, sorry. 4 more, and then we are officially 5 years old. 5 years we've been doing this. It's crazy. But before we do anything else, let's get all of the housekeeping stuff out of the way, because as every YouTube channel seems to do these days, we are not begging, but we're pleading, maybe asking nicely. If you give us a like, give us a thumbs up, give us a subscribe. That way you won't miss a show, and you'll just get told. It doesn't cost you anything, and you can turn the notifications on or off, but it just does help with getting the word out there. If you like us during the show as well, that would be fantastic. If you have any comments, and of course you've got the chat room, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch, you can send us your chat messages through all of those platforms, so please do. And of course, if you know someone who would enjoy this show that doesn't already, then please feel free to share the link and spread the gospel according to Pro Synth Network. We are a community channel. We're not a business. We're not for profit. We are here to just deliver great content and news and interviews to the people within the community. And so we do rely on your support financially. And so you can do that in any number of ways. You can send us a super chat or super sticker in YouTube. That'd be fantastic. Or you can get something in return and spend a little bit of money on our merchandise, which the store is doing very well. And we take a little slice off the top of every merchandise sale. So every T-shirt, jogging bottoms, hoodie, dress, mouse mat. I just got my big table mat. I can't show you, but it's lovely. It's this lovely kind of shiny, smooth desk protecting thing with the big Pro Synth Network logo in the middle. I also got some polo shirts, and the polo shirts are really, really nice. So lots of stuff that you can buy there, and you can support the Pro Synth Network in your fashion attire. You can also support us on social media. We are across all of the platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Blue Sky, Twitch, Instagram, Threads, and vicariously TikTok. Although we don't really do much on there, it was a bit of an experiment that didn't really work. So you can do that, and there's loads of ways you can do it. The other way you can support us, of course, is through Patreon, and you can subscribe to Patreon for a minimum, I think, of $2 a month, and that gets you access to exclusive content such as ad-free videos or exclusive clips, and also sounds for your synthesizers. We've got sounds for lots of software and hardware synthesizers that have been donated to us by some of the best sound developers out there. James Dyson, Mark Barnes, loads more coming through. So if you subscribe to that channel, we get a little support, you get access to some free stuff, and the same applies to YouTube channel membership. Same thing, minimum $2. You get all of the free stuff thrown in, and you get that warm fuzzy feeling to know that you have supported us and kept us on air for almost 5 blooming years, which is fantastic. If you have a question during the show for any of the presenters or for our esteemed guest, please do stick a big capital Q at the front of your question. That way it makes it easier for us to find and then get that question out there. We've got a whole couple of hours here to talk lots of geeky, nerdy, synthy stuff. If you want to support the Bob Moog Foundation, and why wouldn't you, then you can donate to the Bob Moog Foundation right there. There's the address. It's bit.ly/contribute BMF. Better still, you can also become a member of the Bob Moog Foundation, which is a great thing to do. So there you go. There's the link, and we'll make sure those links are shared in the chat and down below under here. You can also buy stuff. You can buy merch from the Bob Moog Foundation, bit.ly/shop BMF. And there's a reason we're sharing those links, because today's show has everything to do with the Bob Moog Foundation, an organization we are beyond thrilled to support. Also, don't forget the Alan R. Perlman Foundation, equally important, and equally the daughter of a synth legend doing sterling work in keeping her father's legacy going for the benefit of everyone. So the Alan R. Perlman Foundation.org, and you can also donate to them at that same address, but stick a donate on the end, and you'll get through and you can make a donation there. They've also got a merch store. You can buy stuff from there. There we go. I've hawked our wares, and we've done all the housekeeping. Thank you very much indeed for your time. It is much appreciated. It is now time to get stuck into the proper show. Before I do, also can I just thank the moderators that are in the chat. We should have Andy Brooks in there. We should have Ben from Musings, who's definitely there. I've seen him. And hopefully Synth Addict, Andy Synth Addict out there on the West Coast of America. He generally joins a little bit later because it's a little bit early for him, I think. And there we go. So there we go. I think we've done everything there. And we've had some donations in already. The inimitable Dr. Mike Metley, who stood in so well for us last week. He says he'll have to skish out of here early today, but wants to say hi to all and sundry. A special hi to Marcus. Thank you very much for your donation. Mike, who does sterling work, writing great books for Bukes, editing them, and doing manuals for Arturia and lots of other stuff as well. Matt Evans says, hello, can you hear me? Well, we can't hear you, but we can certainly see your donation of £5. Thank you very much indeed. Very relevant, given the news in the last couple of hours. £5 to go towards our nuclear bunker, which we'll need by the end of next week's show. Scarily accurate, I think, maybe. Andrew Longhurst, £2.56, because it is 256 episodes in. And the fantastic Chris Blythe, have you finished your Fairlight yet? That's what I want to know. And if not, why not? Thank you ever so much indeed. Scotland's finest, again, over on the west coast of the USA. We appreciate your donation. Thank you very much. And we appreciate all the donations. You are marvelous, wonderful people. And you shall all go to the special place that you want to go to at the end of this this mortal coil. We love you all. Thank you ever so much indeed. Right. Let me bring in my cohorts. Let's go over to Mr. Andrew Longhurst first. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm very excited today to talk to and hear from the lovely guest that we have, and also, of course, Kent, who's here. So it's great to be here. Much love to all of you out there for being so patient last week as well.
Excellent. No, it was great. You did a sterling job. We shan't say anything about the silent videos yet.
No.
Anyway, let's go over to what is a rather empty Spong Towers. You have floor. You have carpet.
I was robbed.
It looks like it.
Yeah. Yes, it's all part of the. Let's get the USBs working properly, and then it was like there was so many other things going. Well, hang on a minute, that's not working properly. That's not even connected. And the next thing I know, there's nothing. It's a computer, a mixer, and an interface, and that's it.
It's kind of nice, isn't it?
Oops. Well, yeah. Well, there's certainly not as much coming back in. Put it that way.
Cool.
We will keep it.
It is that kind of thing, isn't it? When you clear out your studio and you put like just the really important, like cannot live without things in, and you look around and think, wow, this room is actually quite big. I've got a lot of space, and then within a week, it's all gone again.
Yeah, I'm going to try and be disciplined about it this time, and keep it to just what. No. Keeping it to a bare min, honestly.
Okay, well,
yeah,
we've got that on record now. Okay, so
I want less, all working.
Yes,
not more, not really working. What's the point?
By the way, you've because when I spoke to you about 2 hours ago, the montage was still up, but that's now behind you as well.
Yes. Because
wow,
it's too low.
It is, yeah. You do stoop when you play that, don't you?
Yeah. So the 80 should really be just the 80.
You don't need much more, do you?
Well, it's not that. It's just that I can actually play the 80 via MIDI once I've configured it.
Yeah.
So because it has the facility. So so I just want everything to work. And if it's not working properly, then don't bother setting it up.
Yeah, my colleague Peter Wilk, who I helped restore Fairlights with, he put he got a rack mount Series 3 Fairlight and he put it in the cupboard under his stairs, and you could shut the door and you couldn't hear the fans going, and then he just wired it up to his studio upstairs above him. It's perfect. All he had was just the keyboard, and everything else was just stuck in the cupboard. Yeah, it's ambitions. I think I'll try and go for that. Cool. Anyway, before we get to our guest, just very quickly, thank you, Ollie. €5. Been a while. It has. It's good to see you, sir. I just deleted your fantastic merchandise pictures from our archive in the studio. I wished I'd kept those because they were rather funny. But thank you ever so much for your donation, and thank you to the marvelous Robert St. John of Cherry Audio, no less, sharing the gift of payday. Yes, of course, it's the last day of the month. What are you spending your money on? Well, Robert's sending us nearly $10. Thank you very much indeed. And watch this space, because Cherry Audio just yesterday dropped a little teaser video. They've been quiet since Christmas. Not for much longer. Watch this space, and that's a good reason for you to subscribe, because we will, I'm sure, be speaking with the wonderful people at Cherry Audio very soon. But anyway, we need to crack on with this show, because we have an incredible guest. He's been on the show before. It's been a while, but he's come back, and there's a very, very special reason for this. Before I say that, thank you to Michelle Mokusa and to Craig, also from the Bob Moog Foundation. Hello to you guys in the chat. Great to have you here. But there's a reason they're here, because the Bob Moog Foundation, who do fantastic work, have got another raffle. The raffle this year is not for a Moog synthesizer, strangely. It is for an Oberheim, and it is probably, arguably, the greatest Oberheim. And we have today with us one of the two people that designed that very synth, and has been promoting the raffle over the last few weeks. The one and the only, Mr. Marcus Ryle. Welcome, sir.
Hi, guys.
How are you? Yeah, I'm very well. How about you?
Doing all right, thanks.
Good. That's a brilliant backdrop, if I say so.
Oh, thanks. It's a bit of the toys. Figured it'd be appropriate for today.
Yes. Well, I think last time we saw you, we were from a slightly different angle, but it's still, wherever you look at that, it looks fantastically impressive. So I think if I remember rightly, you have one of every Oberheim synth, yeah?
Almost. There's a few coveted pieces I don't have. I don't have an OB1.
Really?
Which is a pretty special piece, although I really enjoyed G-Force's version of it. It's really quite good. And let's see. Well, I don't have like an 8 voice. I do have a 4 voice, so I think that counts. And And I don't have any of the later Oberheims, which some might not consider to be authentic Oberheim, since they were after
Very
Tom
true.
left.
Yeah. Fair point.
Right.
Fair point. Yeah, absolutely. So look, you're here because your baby, the Matrix 12, or an instance of, has been put up for auction by the wonderful Curtis family to benefit the Bob Moog Foundation through the raffle. And we'll give some more details of that as we go through the show. But can we just start off with, you designed this with, is it Michelle?
Michelle Dwadik was the other principal engineer.
So what gave you the idea? What gave you the idea for the Matrix 12?
It was really a special time. We come off the OB8 in 83. And at the same time that was being developed, we wanted to do an expander module of some kind, because the Oberheim system, which was kind of the first thing I was involved in, was the, had the OBXA and the DSX and DMX. And by the way, I'm getting a message that my mic's a little soft. Are you guys hearing me okay?
No, yep. Everything's good here. Our audience are very quick to tell us if that's not happening. So you're good at the moment.
All good.
Okay, great. So we wanted to do some type of expander. Some people maybe have seen a little bit of trivia that there was actually a product called the OB Expander that we showed at one trade show, and now resides. There was only one prototype made, and it's now at EMEAP.
Cool.
And that was a kind of a hybrid of between the OBXA and OB8. We were working on the OB8 and doing some of the things like software LFOs and software portamento, and we made a 4-voice version that had 4 independently programmable voices. And it looked kind of like an OB8 with the keyboard cut off, and it had 4 CV and gate inputs because it was before MIDI existed. So, but that prototype was it was quite fateful. I think it was a failure that proved to be very fortuitous, because the failure was just that the Z80 processor that we had was just not powerful enough to keep up with running 4 voices that were independently programmable. So it's just too slow. And that kind of gave us permission, and Tom gave us permission to just kind of start completely from scratch. And both Michelle and I just were huge fans of modular synthesizers. He's talked, there's a little video that has recently been published with an interview with Michelle that I encourage everyone to watch. He talks about originally playing with a Synthy and loving the Matrix, hence the name Matrix. And just this notion of being able to modulate anything from anything. So we just set out to figure out how that didn't exist on polyphonic synthesizers. How could we do that? And of course, that's what led to the expander and coming up with a new type of user interface that would allow that kind of flexibility, but not have to force you to deep dive into multiple pages or do a lot of button pushes and so on. And we were thrilled with that product. And from the beginning, the expander was designed with there's a single voice board that has a dedicated processor and 6 voices that are all, it's multi-timbral. And that voice board has basically a selector jumper to identify which of multiple voice boards it is. And then there's a main processor that talks to it. So the Matrix 12 is literally 2 expanders, 2 of those identical voice boards hooked up with a main processor. And the difference between the voice boards is where this jumper is, so that it knows one is voices 1 through 6, and the other is 7 through 12. Before I get to, I want to shout out, Michelle and I get a lot of the credit for those products, which I greatly appreciate. It takes a team to do all of these kinds of. Tom, of course, was a big driving force, and there were other engineers who helped with the software. Ann Graham and Jim Letts and Alex Silverman, and they were also involved. And for those who have figured out how to find the Hi Mom pages, you'll see their 3 names along with Michelle and mine in the products.
Nice. So Tom literally gave you free reign, which is I guess that's a pretty rare thing when your name's above the door, and you've got these essentially young kids essentially who've got this enthusiasm and passion, and he's given you pretty much free reign to come up with the next big Oberheim synthesizer. That must be a pretty hefty weight on the shoulders.
Yeah, he put a lot of trust in us, and I think we had the advantage of, I was still fairly young. I joined Oberheim when I was 19. I didn't know what I couldn't do, and I really was just excited to be designing the products that I wanted. And Tom was really, he was very generous, really, to see that we had this enthusiasm, and myself and Michelle and other team members to just do something really significant. And he participated, and I'm sure he would have been careful to make sure it didn't go off the rails.
Yeah.
But he saw that we had a vision, and he shared in that vision, and let us go to town. And of course, a key contributor to that was Doug Curtis, who was already a hero of mine when I joined Oberheim. And then to be able to work with him, and we started talking about what we wish some new chips could do, and have him directly involved in the expander Matrix 12 was really exciting too.
Yeah, because I was going to say, when it comes to designing, since I have no knowledge or experience, I listen to people like yourself, and it's fascinating. You've got Doug Curtis, who is already known for building and designing these great chips that are being used across a great many products. When you're building something new, I wanted to ask, and you've kind of given me the answer, but maybe you can go into a bit more detail. How closely does a designer of a synth work with the designer of the chips, if they're certainly a third-party company, to deliver what they want? You have a vision of what you want the Matrix 12 to be, and you know what you can do with what already exists. How does that conversation go when you approach somebody like Doug Curtis and say, I want the chip, but I want it to do this? And how does all that work? What's the dynamic there?
Well, I think it was, unique specifically because of Doug. He was, you have to remember, he was a total synth geek. He's a guy who was building his own modular synthesizers from high school, right, and was just a genius, brilliant with analog electronics, and had learned how to make custom chips and so on. So whereas if you were just talking to a chip maker, you might have to spend a lot of time kind of like trying to explain and translate what the need is. But if we were talking with Doug about, boy, wouldn't it be great if we had even more temperature stability? He's like, yeah, he gets why that's important, right, on oscillator. He came up with this brilliant idea, which I believe the expander was the first to do it, where there's actually, most analog oscillators have what's called a tempco, a resistor that varies based on temperature to try to help stabilize it with temperature. He put a temperature sensor in the oscillator chip itself that would output a voltage, and that voltage would feed back to the reference input of the DAC that sent out the control voltages. So it was an automatic feedback loop. Mm-hmm. It's probably still the most stable analog oscillators that there were. And we didn't have to spend a lot of time talking about those sort of concepts. I mean, he knew why it was important, And they another example was like he wanted to put two oscillators in the same chip, because that way, of course, this temperature voltage would be consistent for both oscillators. That's the 3374. He hadn't done that before. And I remember his early prototypes, it was like, boy, these oscillators sound amazing. But when you got them to where they were just barely beating, they would want to just kind of lock up just for a moment and then carry, right? And of course, we noticed that right away, but he noticed it right away too. And he just, if you were dealing with just a chip company, they might be saying things like, "Oh, it's not so bad, is it? It's kind of." Doug was like, "No, this will never do. I got to redo this." And he figured out a way. I mean, I think there's very few people on the planet that could figure out how to have two analog oscillators and the same die and have them, be able to so freely just oscillate without any lockup. He was just brilliant, and just a nice guy. Just such a pleasure to work with, because again, we all wanted the same thing. We all were just like, boy, let's just design a really awesome synthesizer.
Because I guess in most forms of manufacture, whether it's synthesizers or anything, when you're relying on the third party to deliver you components to build that, there's probably a lot of politics involved. There's deals to be done and service level agreements and all this kind of thing. But it appears to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, it appears that Doug was kind of more part of the development team rather than just a supplier of third-party products. Would that be a fair assumption?
Oh, yeah. He really felt like part of the team. And Doug was he was such an honest guy, almost to a fault. I think some people in business took advantage of him, but we never had to do like negotiations or big. I mean, he was a small company. He wanted to make great synthesizers. We knew he was going to charge for the chips, whatever, it needed, whatever his cost was, plus some sort of profit. It was just never even a question or a worry, So it was felt very informal. I mean, I didn't know any other way. It was my first job, right, in the real world. It just seemed normal to me. Obviously, I learned afterwards how unusual it was that a supplier would feel like such a partner, and it was pretty fabulous. That's not always the case.
Yeah, no, it definitely appears that way. Guys, if you want to jump in with any questions, do let me know. I just want to, before we do that, did we just say thank you, Robert St. John, who not only made the donation, has now become a YouTube channel member. Thank you very much. And my partner in crime on the live shows, Peter James Stephen. Massive thank you to Peter for everything that he did over the last weekend with bringing not only the synthesizers for the show, but he acted as a courier between various people on the show and Mr. Spong there in the corner, bringing them synths to fix and repair. So massive thank you to Peter there as well. Craig Frustashi from the Bob Moog Foundation says, "I didn't know what I couldn't do is my new favorite quote." I think that's a great one. Very good indeed. Hope to see you soon, Craig, as well. There was a question from Dead Man Walking. Marcus, was the firmware for the M12 stroke expander written in assembler or in C or maybe another language?
All good old assembly language. We had to get every ounce of power out of these microprocessors. So the Matrix 12 has 3 Motorola 6809 processors. These were a big step up for us from the Z80. I mean, the Z80, you didn't even have a multiply instruction. So everything was, quite laborious in writing an assembly language for the Z80, which all the Oberheims prior to the expander were Z80. But even with a faster and more capable processor, it required a lot of finesse, shall we say, to get as much power into this as we could. Michel Doidi came up with a brilliant idea that you guys can stop me if this is too geeky.
No.
The 6809 had multiple stack pointers. Stack is typically where you just you save things into memory as you go call a subroutine, and you know where to go back to. But you could use it in an unusual way in the 6809, where you could essentially compile a whole list of memory pointers and variables into a stack, and then essentially pop off the stack into registers and your program counter what would happen next. This probably makes no sense, but the point of it would be, by doing this, we were able to remove conditionals. Conditionals waste time in a processor. That would be like something like, oh, is envelope 3 used in this preset? Yes, no, right? And if it's not, well, let's not execute envelope 3. And yes, then we should do it. By creating a list is kind of like a type of self-modifying code. By creating this stack that would determine how things are executed based on the specific parameters that were set, we were able to get actually a lot more efficiency out of the processor. So if you had a fairly simple sound, this stack would have a fairly short list of things to do. And of course, as you got to a more complex sound and more more modulation, more envelopes and LFOs and so on, it would become a more complex list. So you could actually create such complex sounds that the whole processor would have to slow down slightly. In fact, if you study it carefully, you can find where once you've added enough modulations, your LFO speeds will start to get a little slower than they were.
Okay.
You speed them up and so on, because it's compensating for how much total loop time it needs. But we wanted it to be quite fast for the more normal sounds, so to speak. And of course, if you're doing tons of modulation, chances are you're not noticing the delays that happen. That was kind of the compromise that we did with the software. But I think it was a novel solution that even with the 6809s, the expander Matrix 12 wouldn't have been nearly as capable without that trick.
Yeah, it's the 6809 was a popular processor at that time because that it was in the Fairlight. There was lots of them in the Fairlight, and lots of synthesizers were using that chip, and it certainly helped things along in the development of instruments. Let's just let's take a quick look inside a Matrix 12. So there you go. Now, the one thing I've noticed, I was looking through a bunch of pictures, and Kent might be able to comment on this because I know he's a massive fan of the power supply, I think, in the Matrix 12. So the power supply that we see here with those 5 big like cooling stacks over there, is that the original power supply or is that a later mod? Because there seem to be more than one.
No, that's the original power supply. It's a little beefier than the expander power supply, which was based on the same principle. It's actually a friend of Tom's, who sadly is no longer with us, who had some great experience in switching supplies. Remember, switching power supplies were still fairly new. This is the expander was in 1984. And, it's kind of a strange hybrid because there's still you can see in the back, there's still a primary transformer.
Yeah.
And so this one was what you might call a secondary switcher. So the primary transformer would step the voltage down, but then it was a switching supply. And it was unusual because we needed a lot of different voltages. We needed, of course, the plus and minus 15 volt and plus 5 supplies. But we also needed 55 volts for the vacuum fluorescent displays, and we needed a 9 volt AC voltage for biasing the displays. And so it was pretty specialized. Now I'd say that's probably the today maybe the weakest link of the design, in that the custom parts on it, that secondary transformer, someone would have to make some new ones up if they wanted to keep the original power supply. Sure. Of course, if someone wanted to go through the trouble, you could come up with a replacement power supply.
Yeah.
As long as you can provide all of the various voltages.
Is it? So to the left of that, we've got the 2 main voice boards, 6 voices on each. Am I correct?
Yeah, you can see pretty clearly in the vertical lines. Those are 6 identical voices. We were very fortunate that by this time we had a system which doesn't exist. I believe the brand was called Nicolay. It was an early computer-aided circuit board layout machine, very expensive for its time. But laying something this big out by hand, which is how we used to do it, would have been a real pain. But here it was convenient because once one voice was laid out well and worked well, we could just replicate that 6 times. And of course, on the right side there is the 6809 and its EPROMs and RAM and logic to control.
So that's on the underside of the top of the unit there to the right with that large blue capacitor in top right there. That's the main processing board, yeah?
Oh, that's the main processor, yeah. But on the voice board itself.
Oh, of course, yes, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why there's 3 processors. You basically have a dedicated processor for the 6 voices. And what was nice about that is that processor doesn't have to care about the user interface or MIDI or anything else. The main processor will tell the voice, oh, I want voice 3 to play, note 64 at this velocity and so on, or I want the filter frequency to be this. And the voice processor calculated what all the voltages needed to be and would do all of the software non-audio modulation, the software envelopes and LFOs and so on.
Mm. So on the top right hand side underneath the lid, I think it's marked there as Matrix 12 processor board. So what's that board doing?
That's the main processor. So that one manages all of the user interface and the display and MIDI. And then the big section is kind of funny to look at now. There's see the right section of that board's got 25 chips.
Yeah.
That's all discrete logic to do the Velocity keyboard. This was the first Velocity keyboard that we did. And I think Jim Letts did a lot of that logic design there. Nowadays, it's so simple to just do in a microprocessor. And even then we probably could have gotten away with another microprocessor, but that was we wanted to have a good resolution. So by having discrete logic to do the timing of the velocity sensing was kind of fun.
And then to the left of that is all for the interface, the front panel and the displays.
Yeah, exactly. You can see there's the 6 encoders. The display had to be on a kind of a daughter board since it had to be set back from where the switches and encoders were. And you can see at the bottom row, there's a whole bunch of unpopulated jack locations. Those are that's because it shared the same board as the expander. So the expander had 6 CV and gate inputs, which are the cluster of jacks nearest the ribbon cable. And it also had 6 discrete voice outputs, which are the next 6 jacks. Of course, here we had 12 voices. So the direct outputs was an option board, which is not visible in this. Actually, it's hard to see it in this picture, but it would go on the side wood end cap, which the unit that's being raffled does have the 12 discrete outputs. And we dropped this. There, you can see it there. Thanks. Yeah. We dropped the CV and gate ins because by this point MIDI was the way to go. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. This must be a Japanese one.
Because I was wondering, because I kept seeing that different versions, some without the daughter board on the underside of the display, and then with a different power supply. So you think this is the ones that were made?
I think so. I don't know if I've ever seen one inside. Does it even have is that a fan next to the voice board?
It looks like it, doesn't it? Yeah, next to.
Oh,
Ken,
that's
have you ever seen it?
Yeah, I've seen one of these. I have seen one of these, and it's just the build quality. Weirdly, seeing this coming from Japan, is worse. It's really bad. Well, even to the point where they didn't even bother spraying all of the inside of the case.
Yeah,
black. Yeah, look at that. That was probably. I think they were probably trying to cost reduce it. It was an expensive skin. This would be after I left. I left in '85, and I think this was after ECC. Maybe it was during ECC's era or Gibson's era. They decided. Remember, the Matrix 6 was being built successfully in Japan.
Yeah.
I believe by Hammond Suzuki, and the Matrix 1000. And I think they decided to give them a go at making it there. All I've heard, I don't have any personal experience. I've heard that these are not as reliable. I've never serviced one myself, and it looks like major changes to the power supply and the display board. And gosh, if they change the voice board at all, I think the big challenge there is that this is still analog electronics. This was not trivial. And then, there's a reason the voice board was on Rev D by the time we got to the Matrix 12. Subtle things could come up where it's like, oh, it's not calibrating quite right, or this, and you'd learn that there was just a little bit of extra noise, or you needed a little better grounding somewhere. And so I'm sure it was very capable engineers working on it, but if they didn't have any of the experience that led to the design that was there, if they just built the exact same thing, there's no reason why the units built in Japan wouldn't work exactly the same as the units in the US. But changing the design, that's a little tricky. So I'll stay away from those.
It's surprising how much extra heat those Japanese ones must have produced. Not only did they put the fan on, they put vents.
Yeah, they had vents
as well.
I saw that.
You can just see it.
And what's so curious is it looks like they went to a full switcher. I don't see a primary transformer anymore. So in theory, it should have been generating even
much
less
cooler.
speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also
I mean,
looks
the
on
Matrix
that
12
bottom board, Marcus. If you ever look, it looks like they've put the sockets in.
On what?
On we got all where you have the individual outs.
Yes.
And the CB. It looks like they have the sockets soldered on from here. Is there any way you can zoom in on that, Rob?
I don't think I can.
Wow, we'd have to look at the back panel of.
Yeah, because
that would be strange.
That looks soldered on. It looks like they're soldered, doesn't it?
I just grabbed this picture off the internet because it had a slightly different internal design. And I wanted to ask, because it did look decidedly different, and not just the power supply, but the layout of the voice boards looks different. The layout of the processor board, and also where the displays are. It was an odd. This is it from the backside.
That would be a US model there. Yeah.
Kent will probably recognize where this photo is taken.
That looks like Richard's back garden.
It is Richard's back garden.
Yeah. I remember doing that one.
Yeah. So the 12 voice outputs on the side.
Yeah.
Was that a conscious design decision to put those there, or was that a case of we've just got no room to put those on the back? They're going to have to go on the side. Because I always think that side connections are a little awkward and prone to damage. I've got a controller keyboard, a Yamaha KX88, and all of its connections are on the side, and it's already a wide thing. And now I have to give it at least another 6 inches to the left to accommodate any cables that go in there. So, what was the thinking behind putting that on the side?
Yeah, basically it was we honestly didn't want to have to lay out a different front panel board because those jacks are on the front panel. There was the 6 discrete outs for the expander voices, and then the CV and gate. So we would have had to get rid of the CV and gate area to make more discrete outs. And there was I recall some debate just with 12 voices, how meaningful is it? How practical is it to have each individual voice output? Now, the voice boards themselves already had a little ribbon header with the discrete voices. So the compromise was, well, let's just, since we had, I think on the original MIDI addition to the OB8, it was stuck on the end bell and also the DMX. It was kind of, the wooden end bells kind of ended up being the catch-all for extra goodies. So it became a very simple, in fact, a user could install the direct outs. We made it as a kit. So instead of it just being standard, it was like, we just gave you a new end bell with all the jacks on it and 2 ribbon cables and told you just plug them in here on the voice boards and you're done. So it was an option, and it seemed like a good compromise at the time. But certainly would have been more convenient just have it on the back.
Yeah, sure.
You can see why. Sorry, no. But you can see why they went that way, because if it was safe for end user to be able to fit those sockets along the back of the board there, now you're talking about dropping the front panel board and the display boards out, and then drilling the holes in the metal. And it's since the dawn of time, it's been easier to cut a hole out in wood than aluminium.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. So having it on the back would be an absolute nightmare to fit.
Yeah.
Whereas just being able to, because you were supplying the end cheek as well, weren't you, with the kit?
Yeah, it'd come with a whole replacement.
Yeah.
So in theory, there's some extra Matrix 12 end cheeks that without jacks that people took off. They probably just threw them in the bin, as you'd say.
Or you'd be surprised how many people kept them.
Really?
Maybe some people kept them. I mean, I think I still have one for my DMX where that came off for MIDI being added. But I don't have one for my Matrix 12 because I just had it with the outputs to begin with. The one that we're raffling has the outputs. The one that we're raffling, basically, it's all completely up to date with the outputs, with Aftertouch. Some people may know that the first batch, I'd say that maybe the first 100 or so Matrix 12s didn't have the Aftertouch in it because they came in late. It was back in the day where we thought, well, people are anxious for this. We'll just start shipping it and we'll send it out as a free kit. So there are some Matrix 12s out there. If you find one that doesn't have aftertouch, it just means it was likely from that very first batch. A fun tip, if you get one of those and you're like, gosh, I wish it had aftertouch. If you get a hold of either the Oberheim XK or the Matrix 6, they use the same force sensing resistor with the same metal. So if you find, like, if someone's got a dead OBXK, or not OBXK, it's just called XK, right? It was just a keyboard controller, no sound, whatever. You can pilfer the aftertouch out of one of those and stick it in your Matrix 12.
Yeah. One thing about the Matrix 12 is that it's such an elegant user interface as well. It's a beautiful thing. It's, you know, the fact that you've got the diagrams on the right hand side, that, you know, it just helps. You know, it's a big instrument. Let's not lie. It is a big instrument. Who designed that user interface, and was there any kind of reasons for doing it like you did it?
It's so funny. It was Michelle and myself. Basically, our thinking was, obviously, having a knob for every function is ideal, right? That's wonderful. But this is completely impractical when you can route any mod source to any mod destination, and you've got, you know, dozens of each and so on, and 5 envelopes and 5 LFOs. Now, the other extreme, remember the era, February of '83, Yamaha introduced the DX7 at the Frankfurt show. I remember that show very well. And of course, a revolutionary synthesizer, a great breakthrough and new sonic capabilities. But its user interface, the notion of a single slider to access everything, kind of demonstrated how far the other extreme it could go. So we were pretty against that approach. So we were determined to try to come up with a way that gave you as immediate access as possible, but not have it be too complicated and so on. So I think Tom originally found, the company was Noritake, found these vacuum fluorescent displays, and they're 40 characters across. Keep in mind, displays, you know, the DX7 at the time, you had a little 2x16 LCD. That was kind of state of the art. So having these big vacuum fluorescent displays was unusual. And we realized we could kind of have I guess today it'd be considered kind of a soft page, right? This notion of what if you could control 6 parameters at once, and the display just told you what those parameters are. And then the right side were essentially your pages. And it's if I'm not mistaken, you basically can access every single feature. You're never more than 2 button pushes away from any given feature. And then it's right there on the panel. So, but what's interesting, we knew we had to have a way of, like, trying to explain how it worked. Funny enough, I would say the detail we have on the panel is lost on most people. Michelle and I remember so often just so laborious over each label and what it said. And there's these LEDs to the left of the center displays that tell you, like, what the function of the buttons below the displays will be at any given moment. Yep. And I've since learned it was a good learning experience, because no one ever looked at these things. Once you got the feel of it, it was, you know, it was an orthogonal design that you'd grok pretty quickly. You never looked at any of that stuff, but we thought it was important at the time. But the other kind of fun fact is the whole right side with the signal flow. That was, you know, I imagine today it looks like there was some, you know, iconic graphic message we were trying to make, or something like that. And the thing I find humorous now is it was really just a product of what tools we had available at the time. Because if you recall, I mentioned we had this new computer, this Nicolay, to do the printed circuit board layout. And you could lay out, you know, change what color you had for each layer on the screen. I mean, we had a big giant color CRT. It was probably, you know, half a meter deep. And it was just a huge thing. But so we actually used the printed circuit board software, and what rudimentary shapes we had. You could make a circle, you could make a rectangle and lines, and you could put simple text. And we started on the with the circuit board software, doing that graphic representation of the signal flow. And that's what ended up on the expander and Matrix 12. So we weren't, certainly weren't graphic designers, though I will say Michelle has much more of an artistic skill than I do in that regard. Yeah. But that's how that panel came about, starting with the expander. And you can see there's fairly large segments of just black on the left and right of the Matrix 12, which is simply because the panel had to be bigger for the keyboard than the expander. So you can see where the expander would end. And then we just decided, well, let's just extend it out. And that's the Matrix 12. Then there's one other button that was added. That's really the only other physical difference. There's a button underneath the left display, on the right side of the left display, that just says voices 1 through 6 or 7 through 12. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's how you, if you're programming individual voices, that button is how you would toggle between which set of 6 voices at a time you were talking to.
Yeah. So if you had the chance to go back, is there anything you would have done differently in terms of the design, that user interface?
The user interface, it works pretty well. I think basically the things I consider today are just about like age, like the encoders can wear out. Some people do some replacements of it. These are well cleaned and they weren't used for a long time, so they're working really well. I'd say, I think I've mentioned this before, my biggest regret is I left before finishing the next version that I wanted to do, which is a 24 voice. So the actual, the voice boards I mentioned, they have a little jumper on them to say what voice they are. Mm-hmm. Anyone who looks at them carefully will notice there's actually 4 positions. So the idea all along was that a main processor could talk to up to 4 of these individual voice boards. And you wouldn't have any performance hit because each set of 6 voices has its own processor and does everything on its own. So I wanted to make a 24 voice, and that'd be a little impractical to do in this, today. But that's the one thing I wish I'd had a chance to finish. Of course, if you win this Matrix 12, you could just buy a second one, and then you have a 20.
Absolutely
more expanded.
Absolutely. So go for it.
So on the interface, just talking about the interface, I remember at the time I'd always lusted after one, but I'd not actually got my hands on one. And then I'd had a DX5 for some time, and I had MKS 80s and all sorts of things. But the DX5 was the closest paradigm I had to this. And I remember going round to a friend's house, who's become a lifelong friend since. He had one of these. He had the Matrix 12, and he switched it on. And I just remember hitting init, just doing going back to everything blank and just seeing what I could come up with. And I was lost. I went there at 2:00 in the afternoon to drop something in, and he had to kick me out the house at about midnight. So I've got to go to bed, mate. I've got to go to bed. And it was beguiling. I have to say it's one of the nicest interfaces because I was already used to that paradigm. It was so much nicer than the DX5. I thought you did a really, really good job with that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I can't say we knew what we were doing. It was intuitive, but I'd say a design philosophy that I've really tried to carry forward in future products is this notion that you're designing products for experienced people, right? You wouldn't say an expander or Matrix 12 is for a first-time synthesis, but you want to minimize how much new stuff you have to learn to be able to do the stuff you already know, right? So if you already knew something about how modulation works and control voltage and patching on a patch cord, you'd say, okay, well, we got to teach you kind of a new way to patch the cord. But if we can make that straightforward, once you've learned that once, now you're set to go because well, if I want to do a little blip on the beginning of a note, I'm going to take an envelope generator or a ramp generator and modulate the pitch of my oscillator, right? So hopefully you're able to just find all those things you'd know to look for. It's not going to help you if you don't know what would happen if you modulated an oscillator with an envelope, right? You're kind of on your own. You're kind of expected to bring that level of knowledge to it if you're making a patch from scratch. But I got to tell you, I remember vividly the first time the Expander had come out, and I went to show it to Steve Picaro. I went to a Toto rehearsal, and Expander's brand new, and I started showing Steve the Expander. And here's a guy who's unbelievably experienced with modular synthesis, right? And I feel like it took maybe 3 minutes of me explaining how it works, and he was just gone. It was just like he was going, it's like, this is going on the tour. Let's go. Let's make these sounds. And in fact, there's a preset we made. There's a preset called Toto Horns that Steve and I made right there on the spot at that Toto rehearsal. And, he said, no, we need like a little more spit on the front end. And he'd say, let's modulate this by this. And it was just fabulous to see someone who knows modular synthesis be able to just take to it immediately was really gratifying.
Yeah, he is such a cool dude. We got to get him back on the show.
He's amazing. That would be a real treat. He's one of the best.
His stories, that because he came, we couldn't believe we got him on the show. It was just one of those moments where somebody knew him and said, "I'll introduce you," and I thought, yeah, it'll never. And it happened. I mean, it was COVID time, so I mean, he probably had nothing better to do, but he gave us 2 hours of just the most incredible stories. So yeah, we'll have to get him on.
Well worth it. Look, it's one of these wonderful things where he's such an unbelievable talent, but he's just the sweetest guy. Yeah. Just a really wonderful human being.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the other thing which was really wonderful about 12 and about the Expander was, from a sound designer's point of view, you tend to be looking for ways to add that articulation that makes it sound real, that makes it feel like a performance, right? And you do that with modular, but it's a pain to have, really. So doing it with the Expanders, that just made perfect sense to me, and that then leads on. Once you start doing that, you've then got your bank of patches. They just start flying out the door. So I from a creative point of view, I loved it.
I love hearing that. Honestly, that is, the Matrix and Expander have their own sound. People will say it's kind of like, it's got the Oberheim sound, but there's something else too. And I think what a lot of people don't realize, that to me, it's all about the subtlety that got put into the presets, because you still have 2 analog oscillators with the traditional waveforms and a filter, of course, a much more versatile filter than the previous Oberheims. But if you just pull up a 2-pole resonant low pass filter and the 2 oscillators, you'd think, okay, this is like a basic analog synthesizer. But being able to do all those little things. I mean, a simple example, that Toto Horns sound, as an example, it's always so nice when you're doing a brass thing, to have the left hand have some nice beating of the oscillators, right? That movement happening. But of course, if you have that going out down here at 1 hertz at your low octave, as you play up the keyboard, it just sounds too out of tune, right? It's a very simple thing. It's like, well, since you can, just send just a little bit of negative keyboard modulation to one of the oscillators, and you can make it so the beating of the oscillator stays consistent across the whole keyboard. And you don't notice it necessarily. You just notice it sounds good, right? I feel it's kind of like CGI, right? Like really good CGI in a movie is the CGI you don't even know it's there, right? It's just done so well, it just works. And that's the joy for me in making sounds on these instruments. Is like you just can keep going to just subtle little nuances to how a sound evolves, and just makes it really musical to me.
I remember adding the overblow for the horn thing on, using white, like the that kind of thing. Just doing that to try and give it that little bit of
right.
It was a great synth. Great.
Yeah, it was.
Thanks.
So we are halfway through the show. I could stay here forever talking all this stuff, but we want to give Marcus a little break. I want a little break as well. So I think it might be time for us to do our weekly Synthspirations segment, which we'll do in just a moment. Before I do, I want to say a massive thank you to we've got so many things coming through here, loads of questions, so I hope you're ready for this, Marcus. We'll do these after in the second half. I have to put this up because I have to adopt the voice, even though it might not be quite the right thing to do at the moment. The Hand of Lenin has given us £1.99. I got to meet the Hand of Lenin again. We've met a few times at these shows. I have a picture. I've got some pictures. I'm going to throw those up in a little while. I met the Hand of Lenin. I met Peter Toll as well, who were both wearing Cartoon Pro Synth Network shirts, which was great to see. But thank you very much indeed for your donation. It is greatly appreciated. Loads of questions coming in. Some comments that whilst we've been there, Sean Johnson Music says Cherry Audio or GeForce could do an M24. That's an interesting concept. I'll have a word in Dave's ear, see if anything's cooking over there at GeForce Software. That would be amazing to see. We will get some of your questions to Marcus in the second half of the show. So keep them coming. Don't forget to put a big capital Q in front of your question so that we notice it and we can put it into the pot, so to speak. Kieran Moore, thank you for yours. I will throw that in to the pot. Right. Okay. So it's time for Synthspirations. If you are not aware of what Synthspirations is, here's a little explainer for you. We want to know what music inspired you to make music with synthesizers. Be it an album, single, or an entire artist's body of work, we want you to tell us why it inspired you, and given that we're a synth show, which instruments used on that album really made an impact. All you need to do is film yourself talking about your synthspiration for a few minutes and we'll feature it on the show and discuss it. Send your video clips along with your name or handle to prosynthnetwork@gmail.com using a file sharing service like WeTransfer, and you could feature on a ProSynth Network live show soon. It's right, you can. All you've got to do is stick yourself in front of a camera. You don't even have to do that. We had somebody submit a sound and visual collage. No speaking, just words on the screen, flashing images. It was great. It was really, really good. I thought last week's one was brilliant. I was so gutted that I wasn't here to see it live. Forget what happened. We'll gloss over that. But Matt did this brilliant video where he spoke his words, but then recorded himself kind of thinking and reacting to it with all the, and it was just so cleverly done. And we're loving the invention that you guys are putting into this. And we want so many more of them. We're building this lovely collection of people talking about what inspired them. And I don't think there's anything more inspiring than people talking about how they've been inspired. So hopefully you'll get some more inspiration from this week's Synthspirations. All you've got to do, as I said in the trailer there, make your video, send it through, like preferably MP4 format works the best, but we have the tools to convert things, and send it through to us using a file transfer service, whether you've got Dropbox or Box, or you want to use WeTransfer. That's a nice free one to do. Send it through to us at prosynthnetwork@gmail.com, and then we will stick it into the queue. We'll broadcast it on the show. We'll discuss it. And then after that, we will put it up for our YouTube channel members and for our Patreon subscribers as a separate individual video, so you can go and reference it again at any point if you are a member of those platforms. So that brings me to this week's Synthspirations, which is from a gentleman who goes by the name of the Budget Keyboardist in our chat, but his real name is Richard McLamail, and I really hope I've said that correctly. Richard has sent in his Synthspirations, so let's kick back for 4 minutes and 8 seconds and find out what they are.
Hello. My name is Richard McLamail, aka Budget Keyboardist. This is my Synthspirations video. Here's a super fast summary of me. I have 6 albums out under my own name. I'm working on a 7th. I run budgetguitarist.com and budgetkeyboardist.com websites and YouTube channels. My last album is called Attack of the 80s Synths, and it's 80s synth pop. It's available everywhere. I'm really into software synths because money. Okay. The first album that I owned that inspired me to get into synths was Styx Grand Illusion. I like the synth work that Dennis DeYoung did, and I really like that intro to Fooling Yourself a lot. I think he used the Oberheim 4 voice for that. Pretty sure. When the Cars' first album came out, I was really, really into it. And I think it was the first time that I heard lead synth lines in a song that were like melodic and catchy. Greg Hawkes was doing a lot of cool synth lines. And Greg used a bunch of synths on that album, a Mini Moog, ARP Omni, ARP Odyssey, and a Yamaha CS50, I believe. But it was Tony Banks who really inspired my love of synths more than anyone else. The two popular synth solos on The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway really blew me away. And of course, those solos were In the Cage and Colony of Slippermen Part 1. I'm pretty sure both those solos were played on an Art Pro Soloist. Years later, I played an Art Pro Soloist in my college band, and quite frankly, I didn't like it much. Turns out it was the notes being played that were more important than the actual sound used. I also played a Rhodes and a Mini Moog, and I loved them both, except when the Moog jumped radically out of tune sometimes. I'd also have to mention The Golden Age of Wireless by Thomas Dolby as being super influential. I think She Blinded Me with Science was amazing. Now, from what I've read, on that album he used a Fairlight, a Moog modular synth, Roland Jupiter 8, Oberheim OBX-A, a PPG Wave, and a Prophet 5. I'm naming all these synths for a reason, which I'm going to get to in a minute. I was also a big fan of Howard Jones, that album Dream into Action. And according to my research, the list of synths on that album is also a star-studded lineup. Ready? Okay, Roland Juno 60, Roland Jupiter 8, Moog Prodigy, Yamaha DX7, Oberheim OBX-A, Prophet 5, Emulator 2. So why am I name-checking all these synths? Here's why. If you add together the synths used by Thomas Dolby and Howard Jones, that list would look a lot like the Arturia V Collection. I bought V Collection 9 when it was on sale, and I absolutely love it. I also bought the Mercury 6 and the Quadra from Cherry Audio, and they're both great. When I was 21 years old, all I could afford was a DX27, TX81Z, Elisa's HR16 drum machine, Elisa's MMT sequencer, MMT8, and a Vestafire 4-track cassette. And while I loved that setup, it had serious drawbacks, such as the lack of a decent piano. These days I've got simulations of all these synths, keyboards, and drum machines that inspired me, but I've also got my Yamaha MX88 and my Behringer Poly D, which is amazing for the money. It's the best time ever to be a keyboard player on a budget. I think my next synth is going to be the Behringer Neptune 80 if they ever release it. Anyway, thanks for watching my Synthspirations video. And that's hard to say, Synthspirations.
There we go. What a brilliant one. Let's have a round of applause there for Richard. Very well done.
Mentioned two of your products, didn't he? The MM8.
Oh yeah, that was fun to see. The MMT8 and HR16. Those were the first two I did for Elisa's. Yeah. He's
got his fingers in so many pies, this Marcus Ryle. I tell you, his name is everywhere, and with good reason. Absolutely. Quick question. It came to me during that thing, not necessarily inspired by it. But I wanted to know, the Matrix 12 had the traditional classic Oberheim paddles on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
Was there ever a temptation to go to the more traditional wheels, or is that such a quintessential part of an Oberheim synth?
That's a good question. You have to remember, wheels were still relatively new, right? I mean, the first incarnation of the paddles was actually before I joined Oberheim. I think Jim Cooper I have one. He made a little option that you could kind of, it had a little metal hook that you could stick in the front of a 4-voice, an Oberheim 4-voice in the 70s. And it had a Molex connector that'd go around to the back and you could wire it up to do pitch bend. And it was on a lever. And, there wasn't, of course, Jan Hammer and others made amazing use of the wheels, and that became a thing. I'll tell you, for me, the levers just made so much more sense. So I was you can blame or praise me for it, but I was certainly a big proponent to stick with levers. I just never was a fan of wheels. I think you can learn to play them really well. But if anyone hasn't tried the levers, most people think of them as backwards because you bend it, the pitch lever, the normal mode, you bend towards you to bend up and away from you to bend down. And both the pitch and modulation levers are spring loaded. So you could just put your two left-hand fingers on these two levers. And, if you set it to do a whole step, for example, for pitch bend, doing the Jan Hammer thing of just doing the beep, 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 beep. Sorry for the vocal example. You get the idea. It was extremely easy. I mean, for me, it just felt very intuitive. And to this day, I mean, I have and love my original Mini Moog and things. So there's no disparagement in any way, shape, or form to wheels. And I've done lots of synths that have wheels. It's just, again, at that time, the Oberheim thing was levers. I think Roland for a while had like a paddle, right? And ARP had their proportional pressure. There was a lot of different experiments going on because there was no standard, right? It was new. I mean, you think about it, it's like a piano didn't have any way to bend pitch, right? So, or a Hammond, unless you were Tom Schultz, you didn't know how to bend pitch on a Hammond either. So, it was new. So levers were the thing, and I'd say it's still my personal preference, but
Yeah, I'd never tried the levers until the OBX8, and it was a revelation. I just thought I don't get it because I'd just been brought up with wheels.
Yeah,
when you play it, it just makes total sense. I had to go on Dave Spears OB1, which has got the I don't know how it's that kind of horizontal plane lever.
It's a paddle this way,
like
which is
again,
that was Jim Cooper, a variation of Jim Cooper's idea. Yeah,
and that was again. You think, it just makes sense. But it's right what you say. The Fairlight CMI didn't have a pitch bend or mod wheel until the Series 3 in 1985. Which is, and I know for a fact that they were lobbying. I say internally, people were lobbying for the Series 2 to get it, but no, they stuck with those faders. That was and the little buttons. That's all they needed, and eventually they gave in to pressure in 85, which was it's crazy. But here we go. So let us talk about the specific reason you're here, and you're welcome back anytime, Marcus, to just tell us stories. We'll sit here and happily listen. But we're here specifically today to talk about the raffle for the Bob Moog Foundation, which is featuring that very machine that is behind your right shoulder there. There it is, the Matrix 12, which of course used to belong to Doug Curtis. Now I hope that Michelle. This is Michelle Mokusa, will not hate me or penalize me for showing the trailer video, but I think it's kind of appropriate that we do just show this little 3-minute kind of trailer video just to get everybody in the mood. Here we go.
The Matrix 12 was and still is one of the most preeminent synthesizers.
This 40-year-old synthesizer still sounds just as amazing as it did day one.
It was the pinnacle of synthesizer design and technology. It's just taken it all to a higher level.
After all these years, the musicians are turning back to that technology. It's a richer sound.
It's the one synthesizer. If I'm going to play on a synthesizer, it's the one I go to. Tom Oberheim, thankfully, gave Michel Douadic, the other principal engineer, and myself almost, free rein to explore what could be possible.
For 5 wonderful years, Marcus contributed to just about everything that came out of Oberheim, all the way up to a machine that was just beyond anything that anybody else had done in the Matrix 12, and that was the pinnacle of all the machines that Oberheim did up to that point.
When I joined Oberheim, Doug Curtis was already a famous guy to me. I'd heard about these Curtis chips.
I think we had just graduated, and Doug's latest iteration of a synthesizer was big, and for some reason he felt that it was absolutely important to show this to Bob Moog. We just simply drove from Manhattan to Buffalo, drove up to the house, rang the doorbell. Bob Moog answered the door. "Hi, I'm here to show you my synthesizer." "Oh, I want to see it." That was the first time we met Bob. Bob Moog was the center of gravity for the industry.
So I had an idea to make an accessory, and I went to Doug, and we talked about it, and he designed this chip. From then on, every Oberheim had some kind of Curtis chips in it.
This particular Matrix 12 really is special. This is one of two that were Doug Curtis's personal instruments.
Marcus called one day and he said, "You know, I know you have these two Matrix 12s, and I'm wondering if you would think about donating one of them to the Moog Foundation." It just felt to me like a right thing to do, and like a thing that Doug would have done. He'd be nodding his head. He'd be saying, "Yeah." I think he'd be very happy that in some way it connects him back to Bob.
This is the only Matrix 12 that has Tom Oberheim's signature, as well as my signature and Michel Dwadig, the other designer, on the back. And all you have to do to own this is buy a raffle ticket. Actually, buying many raffle tickets would improve your odds even more. Please, buy a raffle ticket.
There we go. Brilliant, brilliant introduction to an explanation why this raffle is going on. It's great, just great to hear Doug's wife there, just really sort of emoting. Very touching, very touching. Michelle in the chat says, "Thank you to our friends at Sequential for allowing us to film this video." There's always been this kind of strong connection between Oberheim and Sequential, which is great to see. Still carrying on, of course. So yeah, brilliant stuff there. So we have a Matrix 12 up for grabs. All people have got to do is buy a raffle ticket, and you can do that by going to, let me just get the where are we? So we're going here. I should have prepared this earlier, but there we go. Right, okay, we'll share this tab here and we'll go straight in. There we go. Right, 2025 Winter Raffle signed Oberheim Matrix 12 synthesizer. All the currencies are calculated depending on where you are. So because we're in the UK, it's £21 a ticket, and you can buy one ticket for £21. You can buy 5 tickets for £81, so you get a little bit discount. You get more discount if you buy a dozen, 162, and you can buy 35 tickets for £404. Now, when you think about the value of this synthesizer, this has got to be, in its condition and with its provenance and its signatures, this has got to be a £20,000 plus synthesizer in terms of value. It's almost priceless, to be honest. So £404 is a small price to pay. Hopefully, if you win, of course. Tickets are available all the way through March 10th. So there's still plenty of time to buy a ticket. And you can buy as many or as few as you like. But do know that every ticket you buy goes towards helping the Bob Moog Foundation, which, of course, as many businesses in that area found out after the hurricanes, that income is hard to come by, because the state shut down for a while. There was damage to be repaired, so every cent, every penny counts. And so this is why they do these amazing raffles. So that's all you got to do. The link is in the chat. I think one of our moderators posted it there. I will throw it up on the screen if I can find it. Where did it go? There it is. It's a bit of a long link, but all you got to do is just go to Bob Moog. My mouth is giving up. The Bob Moog Foundation.org, and then you can follow the links from there. But there is the direct link in there, and it's also in the chat. So if you scroll back through, you'll be able to find that and click on it. So it's a special machine, isn't it, Marcus? Not just because it is the Matrix 12, not just because you designed it, but because of who owned it. Now, you say that he owned 2 of these machines. So
yeah.
You
know, Doug, for those that don't know, I mean, Doug, he sadly, he left us far too early. I think it's been, was it 2007 or so?
Yeah,
he had pancreatic cancer, still very young, and you know, left behind his wonderful wife Mary and 2 daughters, Ashley and Julia. And you know, it was a shock for all of us to lose such a wonderful person. But he, you know, he had still in his own workshop his original modular synthesizers that he went to show Bob Moog, and you know, as time had gone on, he really wanted to own a lot of the synths that he'd contributed to, and the Matrix 12, I'm, you know, really touched, was one that was special to him, and in fact was one of the few that I think the only one he owned 2 of. And you know, the family has kept these things in you know, controlled storage and such, and I'd offered to fix up these Matrix 12s for the family, and you know, we were just talking about the Bob Moog Foundation, which is a cause that's near and dear to my heart, and you know, just so appreciative that Mary really saw how much Doug would want to do something like this. That you know, Bob, I like to say Bob is to our industry what the Beatles were to musicians. You know, it's like the center of the universe for those older. I mean, I kind of just missed that era, but people talk about, certainly in America, you know, seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, and it just changed everything, right? And you know, you had that segment about early music that inspired you. I remember quite vividly the first synthesizer I ever heard was a Moog modular, and it changed my life. And getting a chance to know Bob personally and what a wonderful man he was. You know, he influenced Tom Oberheim and Doug Curtis and myself and everybody. And so you know, Mary and Julia and Ashley, it's just really touching that they want to honor Doug and honor Bob in this way.
Yeah.
And so it was really a joy for me to be able to go through this with a fine-tooth comb and make sure it's as pristine as possible. And you know, it's lovely to play, and we're looking forward to someone getting a chance to enjoy it.
Yeah,
by just winning the raffle. Can I
absolutely.
Before I forget, because I'm still surprised. This comes up quite often, and it's a good opportunity to make it clear. People sometimes are confused about raffles and confused specifically about the Bob Moog Foundation, because of course there is still a Moog Music. There is a company with the Moog name still making Moog synthesizers, and it's a great company. And I think the current version of it, I'm really quite pleased to see what they're doing and wish them well. And they also have a very good relationship with the Bob Moog Foundation. But the Bob Moog Foundation has no direct connection with Moog Music. It's a nonprofit that Michelle Moog runs, Bob's daughter. She's done an amazing job. A very small team, and Craig, I know, is on the chat as well. He's amazing as well. And they're really dedicated to preserving Bob's legacy through 3 very key programs, which there's more detail on the website. I won't bore everyone with all of it, but I'll mention one of them in particular that really inspires me. It's called Dr. Bob's Sound School. And it's been a program that has been, so far it's local in Asheville, where the Moog Foundation exists, where about, you know, thousands of second graders every year get the opportunity to be introduced to the science of sound through a 12-week curriculum. And for kids to get introduced to physics and science through this manner, through a way that is almost universally loved, it's like, how does sound work, is I think is really a fantastic way to introduce kids to science, and potentially to uncover the synthesizer designers of the future.
Yeah.
It's not about synthesizer specific. It's physics of sound overall, but using Bob as inspiration and some great experiments to really inspire and excite kids about science. I know how much it meant to me at an early age to get exposed to those sorts of things. So every donation that people make, all this money goes towards this great organization. We want to expand that education program nationwide, but that takes effort and money and staff. We want to expand the Moogseum, which is a fabulous museum dedicated to synthesizers in Asheville. I really recommend anyone who gets a chance in the area to go visit, and to preserve Bob's archives. There's just some amazing treasures of how all of that came to be that the Bob Moog Foundation has to preserve and document and so on. So
yeah,
it's 100% for a good cause. They even go so far as to they will pay the taxes, since there's taxes that are, depending on your country, I guess, that can be associated with winning a prize like this. You know, I'll just say this is my own personal plug. If you win this Matrix for the cost of a raffle ticket, if you want to pay your own taxes for it as an additional benefit to the Bob Moog Foundation so they don't have to pay for it, you're welcome to do that too. But you don't have to. They'll cover all the costs.
Yeah.
And the last of my plug is it's kind of in the fine print, but if you buy 5 raffle tickets or more, we're going to do another special online event, probably in April, for everyone who bought 5 or more. I want to do another a private chat with all those folks, and I'm happy to go as deep as you like with any questions, can show some tips and tricks on programming, talk about anything and everything that you want. And so if by chance you haven't had enough of me in this, if you're buying some raffle tickets anyway, there's an extra bonus for you if you buy 5 or more.
There's brilliant. That's fantastic. Thank you. That's really great, and that's a real incentive to buy 5 or more tickets. If the incentive of supporting the foundation wasn't enough, that's cracking. That's really, really good. So once again, if you want to buy those tickets, all you got to do is visit the website, and here's the link on the screen right now. But of course, you can just find that through the Bob Moog Foundation website, which does amazing work, as Marcus has said. You can visit the website just here. There it is. Let's just take that off the screen, and lots of information there. You can find out all about Bob, the projects that they have, including, as Marcus said, the Sound School, the Foundation Archives, the Moogseum, which I am going to get to one day. Come hell or high water, I will get there. And yeah, you can find out all about the board of advisors and the staff and the team. And somebody said to me when this launched, they said, "Well, have they run out of Moog synthesizers to raffle off?" And what I don't, I kind of understand the point, but the thing is, as you so rightly pointed out, Bob inspired you. He inspired Tom. He inspired everyone. So it really is just kind of giving back to, ground zero, to where it all kind of blossomed from. So it doesn't matter whether it's an Oberheim or a sequential or any other make. Chances are those people who designed those synths, who built those synths, will have been inspired by Bob's work initially, somehow, whether directly or indirectly.
Here's a thought for you. Not so long ago, in Notre Dame burnt down in Paris. And it was seen as the centre of Parisian and French culture, and there was a huge historical reference to it. And no one objected to them spending the money to get it repaired and brought back up, because it represented so much of the history of that city. Bob and the Bob Moog Foundation, that's honouring someone who is the centre and the start of all that we have here. I mean, I know there were other people doing things as well. There's, Don Buchler and all those guys, but he was the start of what we have here. And I think we lose that history and that relevance to everything we do at our peril. I think it's incredibly important. I think what Michelle's doing is incredibly important. I happen to also love the Matrix 12. So the conjunction of all of these things makes it a no-brainer for me. I'm going to be buying loads of tickets. Please do buy, people. This is important stuff. This is history.
So I think there's a lot of jolly competition going on. Our good friend Ken Pierce says, I can't express how much I hope that I win. I think earlier this week he mentioned about taking out as many loans as possible, such as the desire. And he also wants to know how many tickets till we get a sit-down breakfast with Marcus. There you go.
Ooh.
Well,
I can be bought. I'm open to suggestions. If you want to support the Bob Moog Foundation, that would be would be wonderful. In fact, it's funny. It's a funny joke, but also I'm really so committed to this. I'm semi-retired and I do some advisement and stuff like that. But I've talked to some companies and I'm happy to waive any fees. That if for some reason I could be of some help, or people want to just talk with me, do a nice donation to the Bob Moog Foundation, and I'm happy to sit down. Breakfast is my favorite meal too, so good call, Ken.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I forgot that you're the vice president of the board of directors, aren't you, of the Bob Moog Foundation as well? So
I am indeed, yes. Because we have a lovely board of directors of equally passionate folks that really believe in this cause, and a fantastic advisory board as well, with a lot of famous folks, and including Steve Picaro, which we mentioned earlier, and that have been really generous with their time and effort, because they know how valuable this could be. And it's worth mentioning, if you have a charity that is doing something really profound, like we're going to solve world hunger or we're going to cure some disease, these are universal things that people can understand, and those are really important to support as well. But when we have something as specialized as this, our audience is fairly small. It's the people that would watch this show, the people that are your Patreons and so on, that care about this stuff. We're not going to get the average citizen to necessarily see why this would be worthwhile. So that's why we do things like these raffles and these shows and have like-minded people involved, because it's going to take our small community's support in order to make these things possible. Yeah, so absolutely. Really appreciate getting a chance to come on your show and talk about it.
It's the very least that we can do. We can't do much with a YouTube show, but we can give airtime to our audience, who unbelievably gets bigger all the time. And so we're just happy. And I know that so many of our viewers and our members buy tickets and contribute and support. So it's the least that we can do. I also, thank you for reminding me, Ben, that you can add tips to your ticket purchases as well. So if you want to top it up, if you're like me and you just want a nice round figure, you can top up your purchase with a tip as big as you like. But of course, that's another great way of doing it. Michelle in the chat says that she's so grateful to Mary Curtis for donating this amazing synth. It's a special joy for us to honor the work of Tom, Marcus, Michelle, and Doug through this raffle. I couldn't agree more. Let's bring some questions in. I think it's time, because we've got about 25 minutes or so to go. And we've had so many here, so I need to try and filter through these. Now, Nick Howes. Nick is brilliant. Nick's he goes way back with Yamaha, many years. He was part of the R&D team. And he's always got a ton of questions, and they're all really, really good questions. So I'm trying to think, which ones are the most? So this one's a good one from Nick. In terms of overall impact on music technology, what order would Marcus place Dave Smith, Ikutaro, Bob, Tom, Alan, Ryrie and Vogel from Fairlight? Does he have any synth he wished he'd work on? So two questions in one there, I guess.
Yeah, that's a deep one.
If I wouldn't blame you if you said Tom at the top. Obviously, there's a little bit of bias, but
no, I certainly have some bias. But I would say, clearly, if we start first in thinking of analog synthesizers or even digitally controlled analog, Bob really is at the top. Despite being a West Coast guy, I had just never gotten that much into Buchla, and some of the others. I have nothing against them. I'm maybe woefully a little ignorant of it. But so, Bob really is the center of all of it. I think from there, I was next influenced. I don't think it was on the list. Alan R. Perlman. I actually was an ARP guy. I have a Whiteface ARP Odyssey. It's off screen.
Yeah.
That was my very first synthesizer. I think I was 12 or 13 years old. Saved up money and bought a used White-faced ARP Odyssey, which it's hard to find used because they were still pretty new back then. Because I'm old. So the ARP stuff, I was, for me, it was that battle between ARP and Moog. That's the era that I grew up in, and I ended up going in those early days quite the ARP route. I couldn't quite afford a mini Moog, and I had the ARP Odyssey and then a 2600. And was influenced by, folks like, what Pete Townsend was doing with ARP, things like that. So I guess because of my era, I'd put, Moog and Perlman at the top. And Moog first, because he really was first. I mean, I think his genius in seeing how to make this accessible, really bringing voltage control to something that people could grasp. It's just brilliant. Everyone else listed, though, I mean, just amazing influences. They all came after, I guess. Yeah, is the thing. So that's where I probably would put it at the top of the list.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. Sort of following on from that, this is a question from Ruben Jones. What is your favorite synth by Dave Smith, either from or both from the sequential, the original sequential era, and from DSI into what they are now? What was your favorite?
It's so funny, Dave. Dave was just such a wonderful guy. I get to tell the story about I first met Dave in 1978 when he introduced the Prophet 5 at the NAMM show at the Disneyland Hotel.
Wow.
I was 16 years old. And so I used to joke with him that I met him. He didn't meet me because he was completely inundated because this was the first show of the Prophet 5.
Yeah.
And the impact that had on me. I mean, to go from at age 16 seeing that launched, and then just that was in 78. January of 78. By July of 80, I was working at Oberheim. Right. That phase. So the Prophet 5, I never owned a Prophet 5 because I went from, being completely amazed by this brilliant man and what he designed to working for the competition. Right. So I met Dave again when I started Oberheim, and, we had our first discussions of what would become MIDI in those early days. And it was a very friendly competition. But from that point forward, I was a hardcore Oberheim guy. But I'd say in that era, what impressed me was just, you have to realize the OBX at Oberheim came out as a means for survival for Tom, because the Prophet 5 had such an impact. The Oberheim 4-voice and 8-voice, that was king of the hill. Right? That was polyphonic synthesizers on everything, right?
Yeah.
And the Prophet 5 came out and just changed the whole landscape. So the OBX, which Jim Cooper and Tom Oberheim had to design very quickly, a lot of its design is influenced by the Prophet 5, using a Z80 processor and, the basic approach to how you do a polyphonic synth with digitally controlled. So Dave's influence was really big. Sorry, to answer the question, I think I was really blown away when the T8 came out.
Okay.
Again, remembering the time to be able to do a polyphonic aftertouch weighted keyboard at that level, that was really impressive. I know some people think of it not necessarily as the most cutting edge of what was done from a synthesis standpoint. But, Dave continued to stay at the forefront. He was such a pioneer with software, pioneer with other types of digital synthesis and everything else. And I feel I guess I'm going to cheat a little and say my favorite Dave Smith synthesizer is the OBX8, because that was the only time that I had the pleasure of being able to work with Dave on a synthesizer, and he was able to bring his talent and his knowledge to something that was such a quintessential Oberheim product, and to honor what an Oberheim needed to be. That was really special. And, working with the sequential team and Tom and on making that happen. That's sorry if that's a bit of a cheat, but that's going to be that's my favorite Dave Smith.
There you go. It's a valid answer. It's a valid answer indeed. Here's another one from Nick. Of all the artists who used your synths, which song or artist were you most proud of? Please don't say Van Halen's Jump. Have you got a favorite? I mean, your instruments have been used on so many great records. I mean, you mentioned Toto earlier, but is there one in particular where you sit there and go, I made that?
Wow. I may have to give that some thought. I never really thought about that.
That's a good question then.
I think there's some early Oberheim stuff to me that's just so iconic that influenced me. I mean, Weather Report's Birdland, hearing those first bass notes from the, I don't remember if it was 4-voice or 8-voice he had at the time, 4-voice, I think, and those horn things. Of course, Rush's Tom Sawyer, that first the classic resonance suite. Those are just that predates my time at Oberheim. Jump is certainly iconic. I feel lucky to have been the guy who got to introduce the OBXA to Eddie back in that era, and was thrilled when that came out. There was another Jump came out at the same time, which is Pointer Sisters Jump.
Of course, yes.
Which is also all Oberheim, ironically. But
wasn't
fact,
that using the system?
So that was DMX, DSX, OBXA. And what's actually fantastic, we really cheered that one on, because there was a guy named Steve Mitchell who worked at Oberheim, who was in, he had a role with production, but he's a musician and keyboard player. And he wrote that song. So here he was a guy who was an Oberheim employee using the gear we made, and gets this huge hit record, and was able to go on to have a real music career as a result.
That's a proper inside job. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fun story, because I think it kind of demonstrates how it was the love of the products we all had that we were working on. I mean, we were using it. I was gigging all the time and doing lots of sessions, and so there's lots of Oberheim on that sort of stuff. But again, my rambling answer. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Not one that just jumps.
Ah!
I didn't mean to do that. But I'll think if I come up with some better answers.
Yeah. Well, while you're thinking about it, another question from Nick. Did you and your team get involved in the original Terminator movie, given that Brad Fiedel's pretty groundbreaking use of the system that we were just talking about?
That was iconic. For me personally, I had no idea at all until it was, after it's done. There might have been other people at Oberheim that might have been involved, or, again, at that time, it was just the latest tools. We'd often just find out after the fact. You'd find out after the fact. I mean, for me at least, like that. Sting used the system for so much of Synchronicity, and or the band The System, right? Somebody comes out, oh wow, this is like
David Frank,
this is amazing use of this stuff. So that was lots of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, what else have we got here? Our moderator Ben says, if there is one, what would you say is the Oberheim sound?
It is probably a toss-up between that classic, 2-pole state variable resonance sweep like Rush would use, or just an Oberheim brass sound. I'd say it's most characterized as just being fat, right? Yes. That was always the thing about it, and that was important for us to retain through the lineage of Oberheim synth. I mean, you want to be able to just play. I mean, for me as a synthesist, I like just hearing a synth raw and being inspired by it. You know, I mean, I'm kind of embarrassed to get music credit on that video that you played earlier, but that was just while they were videoing. I was just tinkering on the Matrix 12. There's no reverb. There's no nothing. It's just play some. They said just play some sounds. So just play some sounds. But as soon as I do, I'm just instantly again just kind of inspired by the sounds that come out of the synthesizer. So there's something about Oberheim synths that I think are very organic and just have this liveliness that inspires music.
They're almost orchestral, aren't they? There's that feeling that the analog, they're the analogy of, or the analogous sort of version of an orchestra, in that the expression you can give to them and the way it works. The 12 particularly is just, it's just astonishing.
Yeah, it is indeed. Dead Man Walking asks, Tom once mentioned that Doug Curtis designed the 15 VCF modes topology for the M12 expander. Is that correct?
It might have been a misinterpretation. I mean, Doug was involved. The filter chip, the 3372, had a classic 4-pole filter, but the individual cells, you had outputs on them. And it was actually Michelle who'd read, there was this publication called Electro Notes back in the day. I think a lot of that stuff is available online now. And it was just this, newsletter about cool synthesizer things. And I apologize, I won't remember who the author was, but Michelle had found this paper about how if you combine the poles of the filter in different ways, you could get these different filter configurations. So it was really kind of an add-on. I'm sure Doug was involved in the discussions of it. Like, can we do this? And what do we need to worry about in terms of ensuring the accuracy of how the cells are mixed and things like that. But you can see it on the schematic that there's a 4051. It's an analog multiplexing switch that just is able to combine the cells of the 4-pole filter in different ways to get the 15 different modes. So that was a really, really nice addition. I think I would give Michelle most of the credit for it. We were all very enthusiastic about adding that capability. It added a little more cost. We didn't even know enough to think that much about cost. We were trying to be somewhat reasonable, but we just wanted these kinds of things, like the linear FM. There's linear FM in the Expander Matrix 12 as well. It's analog linear FM, and it's a really nice tool to have in the toolbox too.
It's so fortuitous that you provided me with that beautiful segue to a question from our very own FM expert, Dr. Manny Fernandez, who wants to know, what's your favorite digital synth?
That's a good question. I should preface it by saying I'm quite technology agnostic. I'm a big fan of using any gear that inspires you. Software, hardware, digital, analog. If it inspires you, go for it. So I'm quite fond of plenty of digital synths. I'd say, I was, because of my age, maybe I was taken by the early FM stuff. I had the good fortune of being able to play every day with the only Synclavier one that was on the West Coast.
Wow. Starting
back in we bought that in January of 1979. And back then it's, people think of the Synclavier as hard disk recording and all this other stuff. It was plain and simple, 16 voices with a single modulator, a single carrier, but you could do additive synthesis to create wavetables. So it was a different type of FM than what ended up in the DX7, which I was quite fond of. I still have I bought this DX7 right when it came out. It's the same one. It's still sitting there. So I like that early FM stuff. The PPG stuff was really amazing sounding as well. That was a nice combination of digital and analog, having the analog filters. But I'd say in modern day, I've only played with it a little bit myself, but the Hydrasynth, seems like tip of the hat to Glenn and Ken and others. But it's seems to pay a wonderful homage to some of the analog capabilities, but putting it into a pretty powerful digital synth. So
yeah, absolutely. No, it is a doozy. Let's see, we've got another one here from Paul Grooveside. Was there any learning or comparison with Rhodes Chroma or the ARP Chroma maybe when designing the expanders?
The Chroma was technologically a brilliant breakthrough. I mean, it was right around the time we were doing some similar things, but I remember vividly we had a Chroma at the shop, took it apart, and we were really impressed. There were a couple clever ideas which we happily stole, which I know people care about the technical details, but there was a clever trick. One of the things you had to create control voltages for all the analog, right? Now, processor was doing it. You couldn't afford to put a DAC for each control voltage, so you had a single DAC usually for a set of voices, and you'd multiplex it. It'd go to a bunch of sample and holds. So the processors have to go around one by one to do every control voltage for every voice. So by definition, that means there's some cycle time to update the control voltages. And the clever idea that we first saw in the Chroma was this notion of being able to have the sample and hold work either fast or slow, and relatively speaking. And the idea being that if you could only update every, let's say, 5 milliseconds, if you were doing some sort of modulation, you'd want to smooth out the voltage in between those 5 milliseconds, right? So if you were modulating with a sine wave, you wouldn't want to, even though it's still relatively fast, you wouldn't want to hear any steps, any zippering. But if you're modulating with a square wave, or you have a very fast attack, you will, of course, want to load that voltage immediately. So they had a very clever circuit where the software could decide, do I want this voltage to be instantaneous or to have a little bit of smoothing on it? That was key to doing a product like the Expander. I'd say we also learned how not to do a user interface. not a dig on the wonderful people at ARP, but again, it was more DX7 like, and this whole one parameter at a time thing. And I don't know if you remember, it had a solenoid, right? It would, because it had a membrane panel, there was like this solenoid to thunk onto the cabinet so that you'd have some haptic feedback when you push it. So we didn't copy any of that stuff, but it was brilliant. It was sad that it was, near the end of ARP's ability to continue to survive. Would have been interesting to see what they might have done as a follow-up to that.
Yeah. Kind of leading on from that, this is a question from another one from Ruben Jones. What was the reaction to the Synthex coming out of Italy with many of the features that were missing on, certain other polysynths of the time? Elka, not known for their synthesizers, and they come out with, this magnificent thing. Was there any kind of reaction to what they were doing?
Sure. I think I didn't. I don't remember if I really noticed that much at the time. And what was lost on me that I can appreciate now is it was quite fortunate for Elka to have Bob Moog's help and some other luminaries during that era. So I can have much more of an appreciation now for what those instruments are. And in fact, I think hopefully Michelle can chime in on the chat. I think there is actually a streaming event tomorrow.
Oh, yes.
To talk about details that Brian Kehew is hosting.
Yep.
And I'll mess up the particulars, but hopefully that'll show up in the chat. That will be a real fascinating look at that era of synths. So
yeah, absolutely. Let's see, we've got one or two more here. Let's see. This is, and obviously we get lots of people ask questions of people on the show. What's coming up? What's in the pipeline, so to speak? Do we know anything that's in the pipeline from Oberheim Sequential? Worth a shot. As noted, it's 50 years this year since the two voice. I mean, obviously, we don't expect you to break any NDAs, but can we expect something sometime soon, maybe?
I'll take the first part of the question, right? Can we expect something? Yes. I'll never commit to sometime soon.
Of course. No. That'll do.
But, it's really, again, it's a pleasure. I feel lucky that I get to continue to be working on things that are Oberheim, and to work with the sequential team together on what that future could be. And Tom is still involved, and that's really a lot of fun. I even pick Michel's brain once in a while. He's retired now, but still one of the most brilliant synthesizer designers out there. And so yeah, we've got several ideas. We'll have to wait and see what's able to take shape. But
lovely.
It feels like the old days, in that it's, you're just working with people that just want to make, truly great instruments.
Yeah.
And that's fun. That's probably the most I ever could have dreamt of to be doing in my retirement, to be kind of full circle back to the world of Oberheim.
That's brilliant. Well, that's great, and we wait with bated breath and great anticipation to see what might come at some point in the future. Marcus, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an absolute pleasure and honor, as always. Please do come back again soon. It's just been an absolute joy, and I think everyone that's been watching, some of the comments have been coming in. It's just been a fantastic couple of hours. It's flown by. Michelle has just posted in the chat, as if by magic, live stream tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern time, so that's 8 p.m. in the evening UK, with Brian Kehoe and Jim Scott, who worked on the engineering teams of the Mini Moog, the Micro Moog, the Multi Moog, and the Spirit on the Bob Moog Foundation YouTube channel. Go and subscribe to it now, and get yourselves over there tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. to watch that. Of course, the beauty of YouTube is that if you can't make it, you can always catch up on it later, but do go and watch it. It will be some really, really good stuff. So thank you so much. Thank you to Michelle and Craig and everyone at the Bob Moog Foundation for greasing the wheels and setting or helping set this all up. It's been we are so honored that you think of us, and we are so honored to help. So it's a really great thing that we can do and help, and hopefully somebody very deserving will win a fantastic Matrix 12. But more importantly, the Bob Moog Foundation will get some seriously needed funds. I think Michelle said something in the region. Things aren't going to get back to hurricane sort of levels of income until the end of this year. So that's right. 18 months afterwards. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a long time. And, that's a key part of their funding. I think probably losing over $60,000 just because people aren't visiting the museum because there's no tourists there. So we really appreciate the help, and can't thank you guys enough for allowing us to join your show and talk about all this great stuff.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you. There's the link again. It's in the chat if you want to go and buy your tickets. But it's at bobmoogfoundation.org. Go to the website and you'll be able to find all the links right there. We've just had a wonderful donation come in from Kissing the Machine. That's Sean. He did us inspirations for us. That's available on Patreon and YouTube if you're a member over there. Great show. Thank you, Marcus. Matrix 12 would be wasted on me, so please feel free to buy a raffle ticket. I think we should do that. I think we should do a PSN raffle ticket, and then maybe if we win it, we can raffle it off and send all the money. Oh, look at that!
Wow.
We'll do that kind of
idea.
That's idea.
That would be cool. Anyway, but you'd have to convince me to let it go. Okay. Well, I can play with it for a little while. Maybe do a sample library or something like that. So there we go. That's everything. So don't forget, there's lots of stuff to watch on YouTube if you're a synthesizer nerd. So tomorrow you've got Synchrotron, I believe. He'll be doing his live stream at 10 a.m. UK time, although he has been doing them slightly different times. That's a great way to start your Saturday morning. Then you've got Ranzy's show at 1 p.m. UK time. He broadcasts all the way from the west coast of Australia. And then we've got who else? We've got Symptoms of Reality. They're doing a show every day for an entire year. So go and check that channel out, and you can watch the creation of their new album in progress. Let's see, we've got Jason Jervis on Sunday. We've got Jamie at Geosynth, who is back every Sunday at 6 p.m. UK time. So there's lots and lots of stuff. And please go and support all of these channels, because I think pretty much every single one of them is just doing it for you guys. They're doing it for the community, just to kind of foster that relationship. Talking of the community, I did promise that I would show these. If you've never seen the Hand of Lenin, here he is wearing his T-shirt, which is the Andrew Longhurst T-shirt. There we go. And just so he doesn't feel left out, that's Peter Toll wearing the Kent Spong T-shirt. And do you know how many Rob cartoon T-shirts we've sold? 1, and it was to me.
then we better make it 2.
Yeah, somebody else buy one of those, please. Here's me wearing not only a Pro Synth Network hoodie over the arm, but the fantastic. I think these are really cool. The polo shirts, they're very, very well made, all embroidered. It's not none of your printed rubbish. This is all embroidered. This will last. And that is John Fox. I got to meet John Fox. What a legend. What a lovely, lovely man with a great story. That was all at Synth East. And if you missed Synth East, there was our stand at Synth East. So you can see what we've got: DX1, CE25, CS5, SK30. Behind where Peter is with his red badge on is CS20M. And in front of that, courtesy of the wonderful Steve from Yamaha, was a Montage M8X. So you could experience the old and the new, the large and the small, analog and digital, all there. And that's one of the things we love to do at the channel, is we like to go out on the road and take vintage synthesizers out so that people can actually get their hands on and play. And again, on Saturday, we had so many people come up and say, you know, with regards to the DX1, I've never seen one. I never thought I'd see one, let alone play one. There it was. You could play that to your heart's content, and many people did. And by the way, the guy with the red jacket on is Bostich247, otherwise known as Matt, and hiding behind him is his lovely wife Sue. They're both viewers on the channel, so great to see them make the journey all the way up from the West Country to Norwich. There we go. That was Synth East. We will definitely be at Bristronica this year. That's much later on in the year. We might be doing some other stuff in between, so do come and see us over there. Marcus, once again, thank you so much. It's an absolute honor. It's a great pleasure to have you on. Please do come back. To Kent, are you still alive? You've been very quiet.
Yeah. What? You've been talking.
Okay, well, you can talk as well.
I tell you what, Marcus, something you should bring up from time to time. When people are talking about the Matrix 12, there's one significant thing about the Matrix 12 that no other synthesizer did properly. Right? You get an enormous amount of sounds, right? Now, as somebody who's moved somewhere in the region of about 730 CS80s, the thing I really love about the Matrix 12 is how light it is. It is just so light.
For its size, yes, it is a. You can actually carry it under one arm. I don't think there's anyone around who can do that with a CS80. Yeah. But no. Maybe the Andre the Giant might have been able to pull that off. But, yeah, I never owned a CS80, and that's probably one of the big reasons why. But love the sound.
Yeah, it's just the sound weight ratios.
Yes,
difficult, isn't it?
Yeah,
that'd be an interesting chart to make of all the classic synths. Their sound to weight ratios.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I've given up taking that thing out. It ruined me at the weekend. Absolutely ruined me. I think I've only just recovered muscularly. It's a 2-man job, and it destroyed me. So anyway, yeah, absolutely. All praise to the synthesizers that are big in sound and light in weight. You should do do some ratio comparisons there. Anyway, that's it. That's everything. Thank you very much, Dina, for that lovely super sticker. Much appreciated. You shouldn't be donating money to us. It should be the other way around. So do go and support the Alan R. Perlman Foundation as well, doing equally important work. Marcus, once again, thank you. Andrew, thank you so much as well for coming in, and to Kent for being very quiet. I was going to try and come to you when you had Siri up on your lap, because we also do Pro Synth Network dog collars, and she was modelling it so lovely. But if you have a pet pooch...
She is so protective of that collar.
I know, it's amazing.
It's unbelievable. It's a
good thing. We will be back same time, same place next week, but I won't be here. We've got Jason Jervis standing in for me next week, so look forward to that one. You had your hand up, Andrew. Do you want to?
Yeah, just in case anyone hadn't picked up on the fact, buy merch. Merch. There's lots of merch. Yeah. Lots of merch.
Indeed. But we'll grant you a waiver until the 10th of March, because we'd rather spend your money at the BMF. I think it's probably a fair thing to say.
I think so.
But do buy merch at some point. That'd be great. I want to see Michelle. Michelle Mokusa wearing a Pro Synth Network T-shirt or a hoodie.
You still pronounce her name wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, we should get one. No, we should get one specially done, shouldn't we? And have it in inverted commas as in Vogue, which I think is a nameplate she has on her desk. I think that's rather good. Anyway, let's finish this show. Let's go and imbibe of what time is it? It's just gone 9 o'clock on a Friday night. Yes, there's a bottle of wine waiting for me. Marcus, have a great weekend. Thank you. Kent, Andrew, great to see you as always. To everyone that watched the show, thank you so much. Do remember to click the like button. Do subscribe to us, and we will see you same time, same place next week. Thank you all so much for coming along. Have a great weekend, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.